Hi, welcome to The Perspective on Budi Desatu. I'm Blaise Hope. With me in the studio is Paul Grigson, Australian Ambassador to Indonesia, formerly Ambassador to Thailand and what is now Myanmar. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's been more than 2 months since the execution of Andrew Chan and Myaran Sukumaran, members of the Bali Nine. Yes. How has it impacted Australia-Indonesia relations?
Look, I think at the time it was very clear that Australia had one view and Indonesia had another. I think the two governments made that clear to each other, but with a view that over time we would need a strong relationship between us, and I think we're back on the path towards that. Our cooperation in many areas is still very strong.
How would you describe the relationship today since there's been a bit of time passed?
I think if you look at the linkages between our communities, which for me are always a very good indicator of the quality of the relationship, they're still strong. Australia is still the #1 destination for Indonesian students, and that number's increasing. There are many tourists coming from Australia to Indonesia, but importantly for me, there's increasing business interest in both places.
Well, we'll move on to that a bit later. Martin Telagawa, the former foreign minister, he said that the relationship is probably at its lowest point now. Do you think that's fair?
I think the points that Pak Marty were making about contact between the ministers, from my experience, they get along very well. I know my minister considers she has a very close relationship with Ibu Retno, and I've seen in the media reports of Ibu Retno's spokesman saying the same thing. I'm very keen not to measure the quality of the relationship on a daily basis. I think the underpinnings of it are important, and they're very strong at the moment.
Well, let's go drill down a bit. What areas right now are more difficult?
Look, I think the attracting investment into both countries from each country is the big challenge for us. We've always done very well in traded goods and services, but I think there are many opportunities in Australia for Indonesian investors, and the reverse. There are many opportunities in Indonesia for Australian investors. I think there's been a tendency not to pick up those advantages in both countries. So one of my goals for the next 2 or 3 years is to try and have investors in both places think about the potential in the other country.
Is that a question of trying to reattract the focus of the government here from other potential investors in the region?
I think there's an issue around reform, both here and in my own country and in countries generally. It's a competitive global environment for attracting investment funds. Indonesia and Australia are not exempt from that. I think there is Australian willingness to consider Indonesia as a place for investment, and I think continuing reforms will be an important part of that.
Okay. And where do you think the relationship right now is most strong?
Look, I think it's strongest in education, frankly. As I mentioned earlier, we're the #1 destination for Indonesian students. We're very proud of that. The fact is that those numbers are growing. A 5% increase last year. Indicators this year that again there will be an increase this year. We have many senior alumni in positions of influence in Indonesia, which is good for Indonesia, good for us. But my focus is on encouraging that the contact between the younger elements of the community in both countries continues, and I think education's a good way of doing that.
Is this just a question of more grants, or just letting things be as they are and let them continue on their own?
We have a strong proportion of private students studying in Australia. We're very keen to make sure that the product that we offer, that our universities are very high grade, that the support Indonesian students get is strong and available. I think at this point we're in a good place, but education, like all other sectors, is a competitive marketplace, and so we're working very hard to make sure that what we offer Indonesian students remains very top line.
Where do you think there are opportunities to build the relationship beyond just investment and trade?
So I think in the past perhaps we've focused a bit too much on Jakarta. Jakarta, a capital of the country, one of the world's great cities, a place that I love living in. So it's not a question of whether you focus on Jakarta but not ignoring other places that are growing quickly. My government will be opening a consulate general in Makassar, which I think is an indication of the effort that we'll be putting into the regions. I will certainly be travelling to the regions, but we're encouraging investors, universities who visit Indonesia to do Jakarta and another city.
Do you want them to set up relationships with universities in places like Makassar?
We do. So there are some good connections at present between Australian universities and universities in the regions, but I think there's much greater potential for that. There's many common interests in research and technology. The best example is agribusiness, where both countries have a particular interest in that. So we're trying to encourage links into Jakarta, but other parts of the country as well.
Okay, great. Well, we've got to go to break now, but we'll be back in just a moment with the perspective on Berita Satu.